All right.
Recording.
Welcome to Beginner Wednesdays. It's the 6th of May, 2020. Today we're going to be learning a little bit of HTML, as always, a little bit of a quick introduction to that. And also we're going to start getting into some CSS display, right? So that's something that a lot of people have had questions about the past couple of weeks. We're going to delve into that today. I've got some fun stories to share with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and start presenting my screen. All right. You guys can see this okay?
Yeah, we got it.
Excellent. All right. So this is Beginner Wednesdays. As you guys know, we run this each week. It's completely free. Today we're going to be doing the CSS display property. I'm really excited about this one. Just a little about who we are. We're code mentoring, so you can go to our website. We're just a community of people that love helping each other to learn and to grow, be that through code, be that through personal development. You know, we've got a lot of things that we offer people. We've got an excellent GitHub project that we're working on. We've got a really good Slack. You guys can join that. So that's the link there, tinycc/codement. I highly recommend jumping on the Slack channel, using that as a resource, asking questions during the week, and also during this talk as well. So we'll definitely be checking that. Cool. So I just wanted to start with something funny. For those who do know a little bit of CSS, two CSS properties walk into a bar, and a bar stool in a completely different bar falls over. Right? This is the common problem with CSS, in that you start working with some things, and if you don't quite know it, the whole thing can fall apart. So it's quite a funny thing sometimes, this CSS beast. And today I hope to make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand some of the things that are happening. So a little bit before we jump into CSS, why do we want to learn how to code? Right? Why is it necessary for us to learn how to build a website or how to build an application? And I'd say that living in 2020, it's pretty obvious now that technology is everywhere, right? It's what we do for work, right? It's even taken over our dating lives and our relationships, our family dinners. Everything is associated with technology now. You can't escape it. So I think it would make sense, don't you, that we learn a little bit about how we actually do this whole coding thing. Now, unfortunately, right, we can't just tell computers what to do. This doesn't actually work. Believe me, I've tried. So what is coding? I mean, very simply, it's just a set of instructions that you're telling the computer to do something, right? Now, coding itself, if you boil it down, is actually quite simple, right? You just got to learn the language that we actually got to talk to the computer in. Right? Like we use a language, right now we're speaking in English. Right? I could switch to Spanish or something else, but that's not going to make sense unless you understand those words. And it's the same with coding. We've got to learn how to speak to the computer, because as of now, currently, right, it doesn't understand English. We can't do this. So you guys have probably heard of a thing called HTML. Right? HTML is kind of the building block, the first thing that we'd start off with when we're thinking about the web and building things on the web. And I like to use this metaphor of these Russian dolls. Right? It's these dolls with inside dolls with inside dolls, it's inside, and just this nested structure. Right? You've got things inside things inside things. And that's all HTML really is. It's nothing more fancy than that. There's no moving things around or keeping it dynamic. It's just put this thing inside this other thing and call it a day. And that's pretty much it. So this is kind of the anatomy of how we would write HTML. Right? If we imagine this square as a document of something we're going to write, right? We've got these angle brackets you see here, right? We've got some text in the middle, right? And a closing angle bracket like this. Now this part here, this is what we would call an opening tag. Now, don't worry if this doesn't make sense just yet. I'm going to show you guys how to do this soon. Right? Let me put some stuff inside of it. So remember the Russian dolls, right? With these babushka dolls, we put them inside each other. The same with HTML. We put something inside of it. We can actually nest them together, so we can have deeper, deeper, deeper things. And then, at the end, we close it off. Right? We have to tell the computer, this is the start of the instruction, this is what we're doing, and this is when you close, this is when you finish. So if this isn't quite making sense to you, don't worry. We're going to jump into it right now. So do we have any questions so far on anything that we've covered around, why we'd want to learn coding, what HTML is, anything associated to this sort of stuff? We're about to jump into how we do it. Cool. Okay. So depending on what platform or operating system you're using, open up your favorite text editor. Okay. In my case, I'm running a Mac, so I'm going to use a program called Text Edit. Now, in Windows, you can use a thing called Notepad. It's perfectly fine. Now, one thing to note with Text Edit users, right? Make sure you go to help and type in plain text. Where is it? There should be a setting there for plain text. Essentially, you don't want this writing fancy things. It's just a plain text. So if I switch that back to rich text, look at this format, make plain text here. All right, that's very important when we're writing code. Just set that to true. If you're on Windows, you don't have to worry about that. It's automatically in plain text for you. So how do we actually write HTML? How does this whole coding experience actually work? All right. Well, let's try something. Let's go ahead and create a page. Let's say my fancy title. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this file. File save. But you'll notice it is actually saved as a text file. We don't want that. All right. We want to. Let's try this again. Duplicate. And I'm actually going to save this as a HTML file. Where are we? So we'll say, let's just call this introduction. Now HTML. This is very important, team. The .html. Who can tell me why this is important? Anybody know?
Is that way the browser knows what sort of file to render?
Yep, precisely. It's not a text file, it's a HTML file, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Oop, that didn't actually work. Let me have a look. Just going to rename this in Finder. We had this introduction. Let's rename this to HTML. Now, in Mac, that will pop this thing up and saying, are you sure you want to convert it to HTML? Just click yes. Right. Now, how do we actually run this? How do we go from text to a website? Well, it's very simple. Just right-click, open with, and then open it with one of the browsers that you have available. I'm just going to use one called Brave, but you could use Chrome or Firefox. Any of these are totally fine. Boom. And there we go. That's it. There's your first website. Right? As you can see, we're loading it in from this URL bar here. This part of the browser, right? This URL is kind of like your chauffeur, right? This guy that drives you around and takes you to things. You say, I'd like to go to this destination, please. Right? And you can see the destination that we're going to actually lives on our computer itself. So a lot of people get confused. They're not quite sure how to run their file or how to go from code to actually seeing it in the browser. That's all it is. You're just opening up a HTML file, and the browser is automatically doing the work for you. I think that's pretty cool. What do you guys think? So any questions on anything we've covered so far before we jump into more coding?
Just quick question. I've been using VS Studio Code. Is that
that is a much better program than what I'm using. I'm only using text edit purely
Yeah.
because for some people who haven't done coding before, but yes, that is an excellent point, and I would highly recommend using VS Code. And if anything that Patricia just said, you don't know what that is, don't worry. We can talk about that in the what if section a little bit later on. Cool. So, all right, we had these fancy brackets, didn't we? We go back to that slide. Where was it? This one here. We have these angle brackets, like the anatomy of HTML. So why don't we go ahead and try and do this? I should try and write some HTML like this, because at the moment it's just a piece of text. It's nothing fancy. It is working, as we see here. It is actually working, but it doesn't quite look like a heading. Like if I write some more text underneath, right? I save this. Right, this just I actually see that it's on the same line, and it doesn't look any different from anything else. So how do we turn this into a title or a heading? Does anybody actually know? I'm curious.
You add an element tag.
So going back here, an element tag. Right, which one are we going to add?
You were going to do an H1, probably for my fancy title.
Okay. Fancy title. So H1. So let's jump in and actually write our first one, right? So we're going to open up this angle bracket like this. Now, H1, right? What's that? Well, as I said to you before, right, computers have a very specific language. Now, as a human being, we don't know what the H. If someone walked up to you on the street and said H1, you'd go, "I'm sorry, is that the name of your new documentary that you're making? Like, what is H1?" But a computer can understand this very literally, and to a computer, this says heading 1. This is actually pre-programmed into your browser. Let me show you. Right? Now, what else do we need to make sure that this works? Let's try this. Right? Let's save this file. So file save. Make sure you come back here, and then just go File or View Refresh. I just press Command R. Okay, so it's kind of working. Something's changed, which is good. But we actually noticed that this stuff down the bottom here has also changed.
You got a suggestion from Janelle there in the chat.
Can you read it out to me? I can't find the window.
It's the same thing you had before with the H1, except there's a / in front of it.
A /. You mean like this?
Close it. Close it.
Close it.
You gotta close it.
Close the door. You gotta open the door, close the door. Right? Let's try this. So instead of going File Save, I'm just gonna press Command S. And instead of going View Refresh or Reload, I'm just gonna press Command R. Hey, looks like Janelle was right. Let's look into this a little bit further, team. Right? We've got this H1 opening tag, we call it. This is a tag. Anything inside these angle brackets is a tag. And we've got a closing tag. Now these need to match up, right? So somebody might also ask, does this have any effect, having space in here? Right? What do people think? If I press refresh, is it going to be a big piece of blank space in the middle? Refresh? No, there's not. Now, this doesn't actually affect your code at all. You can actually have like this. And this will do the exact same thing. Right? What we call all this space in between, we call it white space. Right? It's not a racist term. It's just a space that means anything in here you can just ignore. It's just for the developer. Right? It's just blank. Kind of like the paper. Right? So typically what we do as HTML coders is we'd put something on the new line. So instead of having it all bunched up together like this, which you can do, right? Typically what you do is you put it on a new line and press Tab. Now Tab, right, makes it go into the new, like a little bit deeper. Remember our babushka dolls? Right, you're going one level deeper into the code, right? So that's all that that's doing. All right. Great. So that's working really well. What else have we got, team? What are some other? This is what we call a HTML element, right? You've got the opening tag, some content, and closing tag. This is what we call an element, right? What other elements do we have? If I have a big long piece of text, right? What do you think I should use for this content? What makes sense to?
Paragraph.
Paragraph, right? All right, so how do we write a paragraph? Well, we know that we need some kind of opening bracket. So we open that up.
Yeah, I think Janelle got it in the chat. Take a look. It's
P.
P, right? Yeah.
Yep, that's P.
Yeah, Janelle got it.
So just do P. Now someone might ask, does it matter if it's a capital P or a lowercase p? No, doesn't matter. It's what we call case insensitive. Now, where do we want the paragraph to end? Let's say we want it to end here. Right, and we'll have a second paragraph underneath. P. And then another one down here. Close the P. I'll save this, refresh. Excellent. So we can actually see the browser has done some handling of this spacing for us, right? It's automatically added a space in between. In fact, that's actually not related to, again, the white space. See how here it's actually still close in this case? The reason why is the browser adds some default styles to your base elements that you've got going here. So that's great, team. I'm pretty excited and happy with what we've got here. I hope you guys are too, because now we're starting to see how this all fits together. Right? You're starting to notice how to write an opening tag, write some content, right? Close it off. Does anybody have any questions on how we've done this so far? I'm curious. What do I need to know?
I have a question. Do you have to add an indent as well for the paragraph, like underneath, as you did with the H1?
No.
Or no?
So that's what I was saying before, is that the white space actually doesn't matter. So I can go ahead and bunch this up like that, and it won't affect it at all. Right? It's purely just for the programmer. Now, good convention, right? We start getting into how the code looks. A lot of developers will talk about that, right? If you've ever heard of something called linting, right? That's this kind of thing. It's how the code looks. So I can come in here and actually add tabs to all these, and it won't make a lick of difference, but it makes the code a little bit easier to read, if that makes sense.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Now we haven't looked into nesting yet, so why don't we try and put something inside the paragraph, right? Who knows? Who can think of a good thing to put inside a paragraph? A good element, a new one. Does it make sense to put a paragraph inside a paragraph? I don't think so.
You could add a list of some sort.
A list? Well, now we're getting fancy. Which type of list would you like to add?
Well, we could go with an unordered list or an ordered list.
Whoa, hold the phone, right? What does that mean? Right? An unordered list. I don't like things to be unordered. I like order. Right? What is this unordered list and ordered list that she speaks of? Right?
Well, you'll have to put a tag in there and show us.
Yeah. Well, I think conceptually, before we do that, right? An example of an unordered list, right? Does it matter which order you get your groceries in? Right? A shopping list?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Not really, right? You can just go from, it might be a little bit inefficient, but you can go and get the milk, and then you can go and get the bread, and you can go and get some avocados, and you can, it doesn't matter what order you do it, as long as you get everything on the list, right? However, can we apply that same philosophy to cooking with all the recipes? Right, I'm going to, first I'm going to put the flour in the oven. And then I'm going to add some eggs. and then I'm going to stir it. And then I'm going to knead the dough. Well, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's the difference between an ordered list and an unordered list, right? So how do we do this? All right, well, an ordered list, right? We use this with the OL tag, ordered list, like this. Now, what do we make sure we do? After we open the door, we've also got to close the door. So with the same one, like this. Now, here's a common mistake that I see a lot of developers make. They'll put this outside here, right? Who can see the problem with this? Right? We open the P tag, we open the OL tag, then we close the P tag before we close this one. This doesn't make sense. The computer goes, uh-oh, I don't know how to read this, right? It's like having one of the arms of one of these babushka dolls sticking out the side, right? You can't close it properly, right? So you got to make sure you close it. So we'll put that OL tag inside here. Now to add these list items, who knows what tag we use for this?
Li.
Starts with Li. That's right. So this is the ordered list. So we'll do the shopping, the ingredients first. So we'll have put flour in the bowl. Right. Close the Li. Now you'll notice that in this case, I'm actually not creating a new line. That's just because it's a bit easier to read. Right. Doesn't make a lick of difference. Put flour in the bowl. Add eggs. Right. And last one is going to say mix well. Right. So we'll save this. Come back here and we'll refresh. Command R. And look at that, team. Did we put these numbers in here? No, we didn't. And this is an example of an ordered list. It's ordered. 1, 2, 3. What happens if we change this OL to a UL? Right? Refresh. So now the order doesn't matter, and it's converted it to bullet points. Right? So we'll turn that back. Why don't we create the shopping list before we do the cooking? Right? So we'll have the flour. We need some flour. We need some eggs. And maybe we need some sugar. So now you can see, whoop, sorry, that's an unordered list. So now you can see the difference between the two. Just very simply by changing the tag from the ordered list or the unordered list. Any questions we've covered? Anything we've covered so far, team? Are you guys following along? I encourage you guys to also write this yourselves. Have a play with it. Cool. So this is all well and good, right? But the designers like Mark will come along and say, Tristan, this is ugly. All right, what are we going to do about this? All right, how do we make this stuff look good? Because this looks pretty hideous. Right, black and white, default Times New Roman font. Right, there's too much padding here. Right, it doesn't look nice. So what are we going to do about this? Well, let me jump back into the presentation. All right, enter CSS. All right, this is pretty much CSS in a nutshell. You've got all this construction going on, all the HTML, right, being assembled. And CSS, these guys come along and they say, why don't we put this object over here? Why don't we color this thing blue and this thing gray and this thing red? Right, why don't we move these things around to make it look good? That's kind of what CSS does. So how does CSS actually work? Well, it's very easy. There's actually only 3 things that you need to remember. I like to remember it like this, right? The first thing is you're going to find something. So in this case, he's pointing to something, right? We don't know exactly what he's pointing to, but he's pointing to something. He's finding something to this other guy and saying, hey, I think we should do something to this thing. So that's what we call a selector, a CSS selector. You're selecting something on the page to do something with it. Right? Then we have these curly brackets, right? And again, like HTML, all the content sits inside those brackets. So anything that lives inside these brackets applies to whatever you're pointing to. So the second thing we have is a property, right? What are we going to change? So in this case, he's saying, we don't know exactly what he's saying, but he might be saying, let's change the color of that wall, right? So in that case, this might be background color for this property here, right? That's what we call a property. Now you can have there's many different properties to change things, right? The third thing that we have in CSS is the value. So what are we changing it to? So in this case, he's pointing at the wall. He's saying, let's change that background color to blue or to red. And that's where this would live right here, right? So any questions on anything on this, what we've covered so far? We're about to jump into coding it. I just wanted to make sure that this is clear for everyone. Cool. So how would you guys like to see this done? Right. Let's close this down. So first part, right, is we have to actually write we have to carve out a space for our CSS to live, right? So we do this inside HTML with a style tag, like this. So we've opened the door, got to close the door, right? Now everything inside here, team, is not HTML. This is not HTML inside these things and these tags, right? This is a new language called CSS, and that's exactly what we were looking at here, wasn't it? So we've got to find something, right? We have these brackets like this. Then we've got a change, right, to something, and then we have the semicolon at the end. The reason why we have a semicolon, it's kind of like the Terminator, right? It tells the computer, hey, stop, right? Get out, right? Gotta go to a new line, right? So we can change something else, another thing, right? Something. So we can actually have multiple, what we call statements, right? These are CSS statements. You're saying something, right? It's like this guy. He's saying, do this, and then do this, and then do this, right? That's essentially what you're doing here. So obviously this isn't correct code. So why don't we go ahead and try and change the color of something? For example, the title. So what's our first step, team? The selector. So who knows how to select the title? Who can tell me?
Use the tag.
Use the tag. Use the force. Use the tag, Luke. Right? Just reminded me of that. So, so we've got this H1 tag, right? So what if we just put this here like this, H1, right? So selecting that is the first step. Check. Right. Second thing is the property. Remember, so we've got this guy. He's pointing to something, right? Go and change the H1, right? Cool. So we've got the H1, right? Go and change the H1 to blue, right? So we come in here. Now, who knows how to change this color, right? Who knows what property we'll use for this? Well, I'm going to use color. Remember to have the colon in here. This is important. This is the separator between what you're changing and what you're changing it to. I'm just going to remove these other ones for now. All right. So why don't we just change this to blue, like this? You want to go ahead and save this and refresh. Boom. All right, Mark's happy. Aren't you, Mark? He's like, finally, there's something other than black on the page. All right, but he might say, oh, I don't like that color. I'll use something else. No worries. You can go and change this to your heart's content. Right? Whether it's red, right? Whether it's green, whether it's some fancy other color. All right, we can get into that another time, but you get a lot of customizability on this. All right? Cool. So that's kind of how CSS works, right? Now, what I wanted to get into with you guys today was this thing called display, right? CSS display.
Hey Tristan, before you get to display,
Yeah.
Just for Frank, can you give a background color to the H1?
Oh yeah,
The heading?
absolutely.
Yeah, Frank.
And sorry if I'm not seeing your messages, guys. It's not coming up on my screen. So thanks, Shane, for pointing that out.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
So we've got background color like this, right? Let's change this to, we've got a blue here. Why don't we change the background to blue and the color to white? Background color blue. Yes. There you go. Background color red. All right, color blue. All right, please don't do that because that looks horrible. And Mark will kill you in your sleep. Bad contrast, he'll say. All right, that's a little bit better. All right. So does that answer your question, Frank?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we're kind of getting in the knack of CSS, guys, aren't we? All right, what's next? This display thing. Who's heard of this display property before? Probably seen it in a couple places. Well, here's how we use it. All right. Imagine this Christmas time, right? And you want to go sit on the couch with your family, but your bloody cousin, right, Gerald, we'll call him Gerald, he's fallen asleep and he's taken up the entire couch. Right? Nobody else can sit on this couch. Right? There's no room for anyone else. This is what we would call a display block. Right? He's blocking anybody else from living here or from sitting on from the couch. Right? It takes up the whole width. Right? So if we go into our code, right? I'm going to zoom out a little bit because it's a bit hard to see this. So see here, we've got this paragraph. Right? What happens if we add some text after the paragraph? Right? Some extra text. We save it. There's plenty of room here, right? For this extra text to go. There's plenty of extra room. So why isn't it going there? This is what display block does, right? It's greedy in that this is your fat cousin Gerald, this paragraph, and he's taking up the entire width. Right? He's not allowing somebody else to sit there next to him. Right? So that's display block. All right, let's update this to make it a little bit more clear, right? Example of our fat cousin, right? Gerald. Display block in CSS. Right? So what else have we got in terms of display? Right, what if we don't want everyone, we want to kick Gerald off the couch and have multiple people sit on the couch? Right? Well, we've actually got two other types. So for those who are familiar with Friends, right? We've got Chandler and Monica, and they're sitting next to each other, right? They're friends. They're very happy to sit together next to each other and they're not afraid to, I don't know, brush up against each other from time to time, right? They're good friends. This is what we would call display in line, right? They're sitting in a line together, right? If the couch was to resize, right, Chandler might go and sit on another couch, but if the couch is large enough, he'll sit there. Now, what do we notice that's a little bit different about Rachel? Right, she's sitting on the couch with these guys. What do you notice here, team? There's a bit of space in between there, isn't there? Now, this is a powerful concept in CSS called display inline block. So it's kind of a combination of what these guys are doing and what fat cousin Gerald's doing. In that she's sitting in line, no worries, but she's keeping a distance. She can actually change her position. Right? In CSS, we might, for those who know, we might use this as a margin or something like that, right? But she's still sitting on the same couch as these guys. She's not over here like Joey, who's just taking up the entire thing by himself. Right? She's playing nicely with everyone, but she's still maintaining a little bit of personal space. That is what display inline block is used for. So, how do we actually do this? Right? Let's see this in action. Right? So come over here. So let's go ahead and create another paragraph like this. Now we'll say this is an example of inline. Right? Display inline. Right? Now we have a problem, don't we? Who knows what this problem is? How do we actually style this as inline? Who can tell me? Well, let's go ahead and do this, right, with our standard CSS that we learned before. All right, so remember the guy pointing, right? What are we selecting? So it's going to be the p tag, right? And we use that CSS that we saw. Display inline, like this. Save it, refresh. Uh-oh. It's all bunched up together. Right? Everyone's sitting on the couch, squished up next to each other. What's the problem, team?
Yeah, I think Andrea's hitting the point there with they're all p tags.
They're all p tags. So here's something I didn't tell you about the CSS selector. Right? If you select this, if you select a H1, or if you select a P, right, that's going to apply to every single tag or whatever you've selected, everything on the page in your code. And as you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. So they all get displayed in line. This is not very useful, is it, team?
So could you use a span for that?
What can we could use a span. We could use a span. What else? That's a good point, actually. So what is a span? Right. So let's wrap this in a span, like this. So that's a good point. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this, right, to go back to where we were. I'm going to save the file again. Okay. So let's just break down what happened here. So our paragraphs are back to display block because we removed it. But this span, does this span look like it's display block to you? Look, we've got 2, right? Some extra text 1, some extra text 2. See how they're sitting next to each other? Just like Chandler and Monica on the couch. Right? That's because a span, by default, is display in line. Right? So they're sitting next to each other, and I can actually have as many of these as I would like, and they're all going to play nicely. See how they wrap like this? So as I make this page larger, right, they all start to form one line. And then as I make the page smaller, right, they wrap onto the next line like this. So that's the benefit of display inline and display block. Make sense, team? Any questions on anything that we've covered regarding display inline or display block? I'm curious how you guys are finding this. I'm going to pause for a second because we've actually covered quite a bit. It takes
So
a little bit to wrap your head around.
My question is going back to making that change using CSS then.
Mhm.
You need to have a unique selector. So would you use, so you need a unique identifier, right? So you could
That's
either
correct.
a class or an ID.
Yes. So what are these classes and IDs that you're referring to? Right? So let's say the use case is, right, we want these paragraphs to remain fat, display block, but we want this last one, right, to play nicely with all the inline guys. So
beside that particular paragraph, you would add like a name to it, like or an ID.
So
ID.
let's add a new concept, guys, into HTML. Right? Currently, we've got the opening tag, we've got some content, and we've got the closing tag. What I'm about to show you is a new type of thing. So press space right after it to create a separator. So the first part is your tag. Now in here, right, we can use things called attributes. What's an example of this? I'm gonna create a more abstract example. Let's say we have the pretend tag of a phone, right? Like this. Now, let's say we have two phones. Now, let's say this phone has Google Maps as an app. And let's say this other one has Apple Maps. How do we tell the difference between these two different phones? Well, let's say this one has a type, right? A type. This is an attribute, right? Special to the phone. Let's say it's a type equals, right? Android, like this. Now let's copy this, and we'll say this last one is a type equals iPhone. So what do we notice here, team? Right? They're both phone elements. They're both the same HTML element. But we've got this attribute equals and some value. It's very similar to CSS, isn't it? Right? If we scroll up here, we've got this property, this value. It's very similar. That's what we're doing here. We've got this property, this attribute equals. Now, team, this is important. You have to have the quotation marks. If you don't have the quotation marks, the computer doesn't know how to read it properly. So make sure you have attribute equals quotation marks and then the value you're passing in. Right? So let's actually use a real example of this instead of phones and whatnot. Does this make sense, team? Do we understand how the structure of attributes work? Any questions on how we do that? Because what we're about to do is add an attribute to this paragraph. And this attribute is going to be an ID. Let me just close that Slack window. So this ID equals, we have to have the quotation marks. Now in here, we can actually pass something, whatever we like, as long as it starts with a letter. It can't start with a number. So let's call this last dash paragraph. Right? Great. So now if we come back up here, right, and we try and do what we did before, right, with all those P's, But now let's select the last paragraph. Because remember, we want it to play nicely. We want it to sit in line with all these other guys. Right? We don't want it to be the fat cousin. So last paragraph, and we'll say display inline. Right? By default, it's display block, but now we're setting it to display inline. Hang on. It's not working. Why isn't it working, team? We've selected it. Right? This is the right property. It's the right value, but why isn't it working? Why isn't it sitting next to it? Anybody know? Now this is a very common thing in development, right? When you're first starting out, you think it should work, and it doesn't. What do we do here, team? Outside of asking out on Slack and talking to our friends and whatever else, what do we do? What's the answer to this problem? Who knows?
Google it.
Google it. All right, let's Google it. All right, let's see what happens if we Google it. We'll see what happens. Last paragraph is not in line. Right, this is very typical. Any developer will tell you. Styling the first line, CSS. I don't know. What's Stack Overflow? I've never heard of that before. Let's go and have a look. Whoa. I've got so much going on. I don't understand any of this. All right, this is confusing. All right. Why don't we try something else? What did we use? We used an ID, didn't we? Right. ID is not working in CSS. External CSS ID selector is not working. Whoa, so much going on. Hang on, let's try and decode some of this. Hang on, what's this $ thing? You guys see this? Is this $? Right, title ID, it's someone's answered. It's title image, ID is for the div. Right, at the moment, you're trying to find an element with a title image selected inside of an image tag. What is this $ thing? Do you think we should try add that in? Let's try it. Let's try and add the $. Hey, it worked. What did I just do? All right, this reminds me of this coding meme. If I can try and find the image. Why doesn't my code work? You'll feel like this all the time, guys. It's a very common thing. Yeah, this is exactly what's happening. All right. My code doesn't work. I have no idea why. My code works. I have no idea why. This is exactly what happens, right? As a developer starting out, guys, this is normal, right? Now I joke about this, but this is actually a very normal thing. Doesn't matter how senior you are as a developer.
Hey, Tristan, got a good comment from Roman.
Yeah,
it's a £.
It's a £.
Yeah.
Right. Hashtag $, depending on what country you come from.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what this $ does, team. Is it says select it as an ID. So anything that comes after this is now an ID, because if we don't have this, it's actually looking for a HTML element called last paragraph. And as you can see here, the HTML element is a P tag. So what we really want to do is have the $. And now it will work. So that's pretty much it, team. I'm going to hand it over to you guys to see if we have any questions. You know, you're a HTML coder now. So yeah, I'm gonna flip it over to you guys. I'm gonna stop sharing. Gonna hand it over to questions, and I'm curious to know what you guys thought of this. What do we think, team? What do I need to know? Who tried this, by the way? Who actually did this in their browser and how to go? Excellent. Did it work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You showed the two. You showed the two. You showed inline and block, but you didn't show inline block.
So inline block is the same concept.
Yeah.
Except if you know CSS, right? You can't move it around, right? Display is so it's like Chandler and Monica, right? They're squished up next to each other.
Right.
Display inline block, like Rachel, she adds a little bit of space, so you can add a margin next to it. You can move the width around and things like that. And that's where display inline block comes. It's a combination of the two. It actually allows you to move around, whereas display inline, you're just like whoop, like a sardine in a can or on the New York subway. Right? You can't move. You just like bustled in. Whereas display inline block is, yeah, I'm going to play nicely with everybody, but I'm able to move around a little bit and actually change my position. And that's kind of the combination of the two. But that's an excellent question. Yeah. What else, Tim?
So I'm going to ask another question then, still along those lines.
Yeah,
so to do that as a selector, then if you've got something that you want to have inline block as part of a paragraph, for example, would using a span tag be the like a good way to go there, because you're not taking like the whole paragraph. You're just often going to be using a partial piece of code or text, or like how would you?
So you're saying you want to style something inside a paragraph?
Yeah.
Like a piece of text?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say it's, if you want it to sit in line, a span's perfect for that. Just wrap the piece of text in a little span. You know what? I will show you that real quickly, because that's a good point. I'll show you that really quickly. So you're saying if we have, you guys can see this?
Yeah.
Cool. Where are we? There we go. So you're saying, let's say we want let's say we want fat cousin, right? Fat cousin Gerald to be red. So how do we do that? All right, come in here. We're going to actually wrap fat cousin Gerald in a span like this. So again, Russian dolls, guys. You got dolls inside dolls inside dolls. We got the span living inside the paragraph. Right. So fat cousin Gerald. All right, this guy live here. Close the span. Refresh. Now let's in here. Let's say span color red, like this. Now there's going to be a problem with this. We've actually highlighted all the other ones. So I don't have time to explain this too much today, team, but a quick way to do that is to do P space span. So what the space does, and I know I'm rushing through this a little bit, but just to answer your question, what the space does is it says select any spans that live inside the paragraph. All right, so the space actually goes into, if you imagine the Russian dolls, right? Whenever you add a space in a CSS selector, it says grab something, and then inside that thing, the first thing you selected. So in this case, we're selecting all the span tags inside any P tag. All right, and that will fix it up so it's just this one. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. So we got some other questions in the channel. I'm just going to go through them now.
You got one from Mark.
Mark says, how do you keep your code organized? Can you create groups like you would in Photoshop? That's kind of what files are, mate. Files are kind of, they have a single piece of functionality or a collection of functionality. You might have a file that does the styling for the home page. You might have a file that does the styling for the about page. You might have a JavaScript file. We haven't spoken about JavaScript today. You might have a JavaScript file that does the login form, and that's kind of how you separate these things out. So that's a great question. Rashad says we do modules, organize code in separate files. Yep. So exactly what I just said. What else we got? Frank is putting through a CSS ref. Yep. Yeah, folders as well. Sorry, obviously moving things through folders. I would actually challenge you guys, for those who are new to this coding thing, go and experiment with some extra HTML tags. Right? How many can you find before next Wednesday? Right? For those who have been around a couple of weeks, I'm looking at you, Natalia. Right? What else can you show us for next week? Some stuff that you've learned that we haven't taught you yet. Right? Because what we're going to do is each beginner Wednesday is we're going to do that. The first half is going to be around the HTML stuff, and then the second half we're going to try and introduce a small new concept each time, so it's not boring for those who've already been doing the basics. So my challenge to you guys, your home play, right? Not homework, because who likes work, right? Your home play is to go and find some HTML elements that you didn't know, that we did not teach you, and that you've experimented with. If you're feeling adventurous, right, go and try and style them, right? Guys, the best way to learn how to code is not reading documentation. It's jumping in there with both feet, doing it yourself, getting frustrated. It's like that guy, why does my code work? Why doesn't my code work? It's going through that process, right? It's asking questions on Stack Overflow. It's jumping on the Code Mentoring Slack channel and saying, hey, like, what do I do here? My code's not doing what I think it should. You know, that's the best way to learn these things and get involved. So I highly encourage everyone to go and try some of this stuff for yourself, and come and share it with us next week. Come and say, hey, Shane or Frankie or Tristan, I learned this cool thing. It's really cool. I want to share it on the Slack channel, right? Because if you find something that you like, Frank asked, can I ask questions in Slack every day? You can ask questions whenever you want, right? Either myself or someone here will jump on and help you out. And if no one's answering your questions, bug people. Annoy them and say, hey, I really need an answer to this because I want to learn. And that's what we're here as a community to help you do, is we're committed to help you learn. So definitely use us as a resource. Yeah, so that's kind of it, team. Shane says, let's use the front-end beginners channel on Slack. So that's a really good one. You guys can join that. Again, for those who don't have Slack, I'm going to post a link. I can't seem to post a link for some reason.
Yeah, I can.
If someone can actually post that link, yeah. Please join it, guys. It's really good. It's a lot of discussions that go on there. But yeah, that's kind of it, team. We'll kind of wrap it up there. We're going to open it up for hanging out and socializing and whatnot. But we'll sort of bring the webinar to a close.